welcome back to my channel. I've been meaning to do a podcast on this subject for quite some time now. Last year I met a girl who, in our discussions and getting to know each other, she said to me that she felt a little bit of porn was quite okay, quite harmless. And then the other day I saw some shocking headlines about kids as young as 5 being addicted to pornography in South Africa. I'll show you the headlines. I'll post it a little bit later, and the link to the article down below. And in any event, so this is what has made me choose the topic of pornography for this podcast today. And I'm asking a lot of questions, not just from a moral point of view, but from an empathic point of view for the consumer of pornography, as well as the victims of pornography. We're going to ask, are they indeed victims of pornography? And no matter where you stand on this issue, this topic, which is sometimes very sensitive, obviously, but whether you pro pornography or whether you are not, let's ask some questions about it and see truthfully together. Let's talk about it and shine a light on the pornography industry. And instead of just sweeping it under the carpet, so it seems like it's a huge part of a large part of society of men. I must just get the figures right now, percentage-wise. It's radically high, the amount of men that watch pornography frequently and are often very addicted to pornography. Women as well, but it seems with the men it's a much higher percentage. It could even be as high as 70% or more of men are frequently watching pornography. And so let's talk about it and ask, does this have any ramifications on romance, on relationships, on marriages, on the youth? And then in society as a whole. So yeah, join me and let's look into it. And once again, you don't have to agree with me. I've got quite a bit of research that I'd like to go through, and quite a few questions that I'm asking that I had to research myself. And by the way, I used to consume vast amounts of pornography years back, and so I'm not coming to this discussion as judgmental or coming from some kind of moral high ground from that's not the case at all. I could say I was addicted to pornography, and but that was many years ago. I was chatting to one of my dear friends, Rod Gilson, and he's one of my best friends and confidants, and I was explaining to him, this is quite some years ago, I was explaining to him my struggle with pornography, and he said to me, Steve, imagine if that was your daughter. And that really shook me and made me rethink, is pornography really actually normal, or is it for me? Maybe it's not for me, but for others. If you've got an addictive personality, you'll find, you'll think, well, I can start off with soft porn. But it is extremely addictive, pornography. So, but let's talk about it and see that. But that's my personal experience. So what I'm saying to you is that I can empathize with porn consumers. I've seen many videos and podcasts, of doctors or psychologists and others discussing the effects, negative or positive, depending on your view point, of pornography on individuals, but they always discuss the consumer of porn and his or her needs. But people very rarely, I find, in my experience, very rarely discuss the porn actors or porn victims. If they are victims, we'll discuss that and see, or the producers of porn for that matter. Why is this? Why don't we discuss the behind the scenes industry of pornography movie making, the producers, the directors, the cameramen, the soundmen, the whole film industry? What is that like? Is it a healthy environment? Are there lots of drugs involved? Are they drugging young underage children? Are they? Are they? How are they getting their supply of actors? Are they all voluntary? Coming to their studio to say, hey, listen, pick me, I want to be a porn star. Is what happening? Let's discuss that industry. Is it full of toxic masculinity, that actual porn industry? Are there mostly males in there, or what would you think is the percentage? I mean, these are questions I ask myself. Because that's just how I am. I'm a very inquisitive person. I'm thinking of this kind of stuff. You don't have to, but this is what I do. So I'm asking, in the porn industry, the producers of porn, and the ratio male to female, what could you say? So would it be, is the casting couch still in effect in that kind of industry? Well, you'll have to sleep with the producer if you want the star role, which I somehow doubt, because in my research it's shown that most people who don't want to climb the ladder in that kind of a way, they don't want to be anywhere near the casting couch or that environment for that matter. Many of them are there by coercion or in different ways, through holding on to their passports or their IDs or their etc. And many of them are drugged and subdued and coerced in many different ways, you see. But so let's talk about that industry. There are big question marks around that industry. If everybody thinks, well, that's normal, consume porn as much as you want, there's no judgment, let's say, but that industry that's supplying you as a porn consumer, is it a very toxic industry? Are there like old men in that industry, like taking advantage of underage girls like Harvey Weinstein and others, Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell and others? Are there any of those kind of people in the porn industry that would destroy other people's lives? Is there? Do you want to discuss it or not? Or just enjoy the pornography and pretend that doesn't happen? And that I find is when people don't really like personalize issues around them in their country, in their town, in the world. They don't personalize it, so it's a very abstract concept that, well, it doesn't involve me, but it could be, I think, shallow thinking or no real kind of understanding what could be ignorance or very blasé or a number of issues. But so anyway, are there any victims in the pornography industry? That's another question I'm asking. Does the porn industry fuel sex trafficking? Does it or doesn't it? Can or does porn promote sexual violence? Can porn negatively affect love and intimacy? It's something to think about. I think these are all valid questions. Can pornography normalize sexual objectification? And I'm sure everybody that's watching this channel will know what sexual objectification means. But really, if you don't, it's like just depersonalizing a person. Usually it's referred to more in women, and fashion can be guilty of that as well, of the sexual objectification of women, especially women, and treating them as if they just, merchandise, a product. And in the porn industry, it would be just merchandise product for instant gratification. And so can the porn industry normalize sexual objectification? A big question mark around that, if you ask me. Can pornography actually harm the consumer sex life? That's also interesting. They talk about, and doctors have actually described this condition as porn-induced ED. Porn-induced consumers of porn, porn-induced erectile dysfunction. So that makes a person think, really. And so the other one is this: how is pornography affecting today's youth? Just have a look. I'll put these newspaper articles in a link or on the screen just now, so that you can have a look at that. Pretty shocking, man. Here in South Africa, the one headline reads, children as young as 5 being addicted to pornography. But it kind of seems to be quite rife in a lot of the youth here in South Africa, and I would imagine in most parts of the world. Western world especially, and it's becoming normalized. Is the porn industry controlled by toxic masculinity? Is it? Isn't it? Do you ask those kind of questions? So if you are a woman and you are watching porn frequently, are you helping to support toxic masculinity that made the porn movie that you're watching? If that is the case, then perhaps you also shouldn't complain about toxic masculinity, because you would be perpetuating and partaking in it, you see. So that would be called being a hypocrite. So that would also make a person think, right? Is pornography, especially hardcore porn, compatible with spirituality and enlightenment? Or are they diametrically opposed? We'll talk about that and question that. All right. I think it's a fair question. It's my question. I'd like to know about that. Question number 1, I was asking, why do experts and people very rarely discuss the actual porn actors or the victims of porn, if there are victims of porn? I'm sure many of you, just common sense will tell you that there are victims of porn if you just do very, very basic research into it. But what about discussing the producers of porn, for that matter? Why is this? Is it because the porn industry is so powerful? Is it because much of society has normalized porn? Could it be because many in society do not have the ability to personalize certain issues, like I was saying earlier on, that they see this as sort of at its worst, incredibly ignorant or totally blasé, and they don't actually know what's going on behind the scenes? And perhaps they see the actors not as victims, but rather as depersonalized merchandise. And we call this sexual objectification. So that's what a lot of porn consumers do, is treat these people in the porn industry as basically merchandise for instant sexual gratification. So once again, I'm not judging, I'm just giving the facts from researchers, and I've got all the research at the bottom. You can see all my sources of research, and yeah, so you know, I'm not judging. I used to be into pornography very, very deeply, so I'm coming from that kind of a place. So I'm asking why we don't discuss this, and it could be because we also, you know, from the supplier to the producer to the director, the cameraman, we don't think of that, what's going on the set, because we're totally so detached from that, and we don't want to think about that. But can you imagine what type of person must be standing, directing the movie, the cameraman, behind the camera, the sound technician, makeup, hair, everybody there, and or not. Sometimes it's not even as glamorous as that. A lot of hardcore porn, they don't even have hair and makeup and all that kind of thing. But then you've got these people there, and they're watching, say, a 15-year-old boy or girl being raped by 5 or 6 women, men and women. And so my question is, I'm asking about that industry. Is it healthy? Is it indeed, is everybody cool with this kind of thing, that you can have those people doing that kind of thing? Are drugs involved there? Are all the girls there, are they all consenting? Is it all consensual? Are you 100% sure of that? Researchers say that you can't tell. Many of these big porn industry outlets like Pornhub, Girls Do Porn, etc., all those others, many of them have been charged with, many of them, I don't know exactly which names, I'll get it down into the next paragraph down in my notes, but research has shown that it was in the news that some of these porn outlets were charged with sexual trafficking and underage girls, and non-consensual, and they were fined big time, you know. So it definitely happens. So, and just as a distinction between what some people call soft porn and hardcore porn, research shows that 99% of porn consumers land up consuming hardcore porn. So they start off with softcore porn. If you are in that 1% who can just watch soft porn, and because you must know pornography is extremely addictive. You can ask me, I went through it. It's extremely addictive, and you might start off tame, but then as the novelty wears off, you'll want more and more, and become more and more daring, and more risque, until you start exploring things that are really, they can defile your spirit, like watching porn movies called like public humiliation, where they would take one woman into the street anywhere and totally humiliate her, and even defecate on her and urinate on her and so on in the streets, film it and put it onto, so, you know, that kind of thing, it starts, if you are not, that's why they say, research says you can start off with softcore, and what happens if you're watching with your partner and he might or she might not be as restrained as you? So you might start thinking, I'll watch a bit of softcore, and then when you're with them, they start pushing the boundaries a bit more and a bit more and a bit more and a bit more, and before you know it, you can be watching things that you never would have watched on your own if it was up to you. So, number 2, are there victims in the pornography industry? Check these headlines. Here they are. These young children are already addicted, can you believe it, at the age of 5. Surely they are victims of the porn industry. You know, they're becoming hypersexualized, what we call totally and utterly hypersexualized. And that's what pornography can do, not just for children, for adults as well. So these underage boys and girls are there. What about those that are drugged and gangbangs and put onto Pornhub and other porn sites, that they remain nameless, depersonalized commodities? And many women and men, young boys and girls, lives are ruined by an industry that is ruled, quite often they say, by really dirty pedophiles like Harvey Weinstein. Well, he wasn't in the porn industry, but who knows, some evidence might come out later. But that falls into the category of toxic masculinity. So I would imagine all women would be against porn, because much of it is toxic masculinity, right? Especially if you now consider yourself to be modern, liberal, and so on, and you are totally open to the idea of watching porn, but you inadvertently or indirectly supporting a toxic masculinity industry filled with toxic masculinity. So I'd like to question that of you that are doing that kind of thing. You know, the dark web, thank goodness that was shut down. I think it was under the Trump administration. They managed to shut down the dark web. I mean, that was totally horrific, but that's for another discussion. But I want to ask men, if you're okay with, you know, porn, then are you okay with your partner masturbating without you? Maybe when she's not with you, and while watching another naked man have young girls sucking him off, are you okay with that? You know, don't you think that among other things that could actually be a very powerful form of dishonoring your partner, as well as maybe dishonoring and defiling yourself? So these are things that, you know, I think we all need to question and grapple with and so on. And once again, you know, if you see some of my previous videos, I talk about dealing with your shadow side, or embracing your shadow side, shining light on your shadow side. So, you know, I just want to also say there's no, they say shaming porn consumers does more harm than good. You know, sometimes my choice of words can be quite stern, but that is directed at those that are abusing people in the porn industry. You know, that I obviously feel very strongly about. Who wouldn't feel really strongly about the human sex trafficking of young underage women and drugging them and forcing them to perform sex acts on old men, and 5 men at a time, 8 times a day, and drugging them? Who wouldn't really have outrage at that? Not just stern words, but outrage. But as far as the porn consumers are concerned, I've been through it myself, so I want to tell you there is a way that you can break that. And I've got to tell you, when you've broken that addiction to porn, your sex life is actually much better, believe me. Because so many men, and I know this for a fact, I've been through it, if you've been watching porn for a long time, what happens is this: when you make love with your partner, well, you're not making love with your partner, you're just having sex. And a lot of the time you fantasizing about that other young starlet, or not starlet, wrong choice of words, that young lass. Maybe that's your you know, what you're thinking of, or a number of other images that you've seen in porn movies, and now you're just using your partner, your wife, your spouse, your husband, or whoever, well, your partner, as just a warm body, but your mind's somewhere else. And that is such a, you know, people have come forward whose partners are frequent porn consumers, but they're not. And they have said, when my partner has sex with me, it's not making love with me, they're not in the moment. You see, they're not living in the moment, that moment of connection with their partner. They're playing out a porn scene in their mind, more often men than women. And that starts becoming very dangerous to your marriage or to your relationship, because think about it, your partner is not stupid. They can tell you're not present, and they know you're consuming porn. So obviously, and so depersonalizes them as well, it dishonors them as well, and they start experiencing subtle forms of rejection and start going into loneliness and maybe even depression. So you'll see. So anyway, I want to now start reading you some articles that I got off the website. It's an NGO called Fight the New Drug, and this is what they say on their website. They say Fight the New Drug is a non-religious, non-legislative, non-profit organization that exists to raise awareness on the harmful effects of pornography using only science, research and personal accounts. I'll put their website down at the bottom, the link to their website. I also want to tell you about a NGO called STOP here in Stellenbosch. I'm in Somerset West here in South Africa. But I used to do give quite a bit of my time and resources as a professional photographer. In my photography school, I'd resource my students to this organization called Stop Trafficking of People, based in Stellenbosch. Started out by a wonderful woman who I was fortunate enough to become friends with, but I haven't seen for ages. She lives up in Mpumalanga now, and I'm here in the Cape. But she was instrumental in actually starting Stop. She's spoken in front of the South African Parliament and so on, and made really there's research that she was also part of that can link the porn industry to sexual trafficking, you know, and especially with, you know, all ages, but especially underage. And so that also influenced me a lot when I got involved with them, and that opened up my eyes a lot as well. And so I'll put the link as well, and they also look for volunteers. They go around helping people to be traffic proof. They go to schools and so on to traffic proof kids, you know, all over the world now. It's a huge billion-dollar industry. They say even more so than arms, because, you know, you can use one person, one body, thousands of times, you know, and it's just like the money that you can make from it is incredible. So in any event, I'll put their website link down there as well, and then this is going to now lead me to question number 3. Does porn fuel sex trafficking? And let me read to you from this website called Fight the New Drug, and this is an article on their website like this. Sex trafficking shares a variety of symbiotic connections to pornography. Even in the production of mainstream porn, sex trafficking can still occur, and it happens more often than people think. Buying or selling humans is the purest form of objectification, the literal commoditization of a human being. The vast majority of human trafficking victims come from vulnerable populations, And of the approximately 24.9 million victims of forced labor, an estimated 4.8 million, about 19%, are trafficked for sex. Even more disturbingly, more than 1 in 5 sex trafficking victims, an estimated 21%, are children. According to one report of the domestic minor trafficking victims who had been forced into porn production, the average age they began being filmed was 12.8 years old. Teenagers. It was 21 days after Jane Doe's 22nd birthday. This is a story about Jane Doe's 22nd birthday, when she boarded a flight to San Diego that, unbeknownst to her, would change her life forever. That day she would become one of hundreds of young women who had been filmed for Girls Do Porn, a wildly popular porn production company which garnered well over 1 billion views, ranked about around the 20th most popular channel on Pornhub, and reportedly generated an estimated $17 million in revenue. But what most of Girls Do Porn's millions of viewers did not realize was that Jane and many other women involved in Girls Do Porn was actually a victim of sex trafficking. You see, Jane never agreed to do porn at all. She had flown to San Diego to participate in what she was told would be a fitness modeling job. But when arrived, she was met by several men who took her phone, intimidated her into signing a contract she wasn't even allowed to read, plied her with drugs and alcohol, and trapped her in a hotel room where they told her she would be filmed for a porn video. Even after she tried to run away, the men physically forced her to comply. With no way out, Jane was violently raped on camera for over 6 hours. Can you just imagine? The nearly hour-long video of her abuse was then released on the Girls Do Porn website and published on nearly every major porn site, even using her full legal name in the title. When Jane first learned that video of her rape had been published, she ran into the bathroom and was violently sick. Now you might be thinking something along the lines of, wow, that's a really tragic story, but luckily I don't watch porn that shows violence or non-consensual activity, so I'm good. But let's not forget that Girls Do Porn was a popular and well-recognized name in the porn world, and the victims were often forced to smile and pretend they were enjoying themselves. Although the Girls Do Porn owners were eventually charged with sex trafficking, they had millions of viewers and operated unchecked for 11 full years, despite numerous victims' desperate pleadings to have the contents removed. In fact, many victims are trafficked by their families, romantic partners, or other trusted individuals. Again, victims of child sexual abuse material, sometimes referred to as child pornography, are particularly likely to be victimized by parental figures. Sex trafficking through force, sexual abuse and sex trafficking are incredibly traumatic events to begin with. But when that trauma is filmed and distributed as pornography, the victims are re-traumatized over and over again. So how many of these videos were viewed by individuals who would never dream of contributing to human trafficking? Individuals who assumed they were watching the work of consenting performance. The unfortunate truth is that it's incredibly difficult to guarantee that performers are truly participating consensually. In fact, sex trafficking and porn still happens even when people aren't physically forced into it. Which brings us to sex trafficking by fraud. Remember, they've made a point now, sex trafficking by force, and also now sex trafficking by fraud. There are all kinds of connection between pornography, sexual exploitation, and sex trafficking. Often they're just one and the same, but pornography and sex trafficking are connected in more ways than just one. For example, traffickers and abusers often use pornography to groom victims and train them on what is expected of them. Reports show that many sexual predators show their victims pornography during the grooming process in order to lower their victims' inhibitions, desensitize them to sexual advances, and normalize the sexual abuse they will experience. Frightening. Because pornography can so effectively normalize sexual violence, it can then set the stage for victims' abuse, especially when consumers' viewing habits and fantasies involve violence or other fetishes. In fact, many survivors who have been sold for sex report being shown pornography by their traffickers or buyers to illustrate what is expected of them. As one survivor named Lexi, who was sex trafficked as a child, explained, "Right before any time a customer was brought into the room, I would be shown pornography, and being that young, I think it translated for me as an overall thing as a woman. This is what men expect from you, and this is what people want from you." So she was obviously totally indoctrinated, well groomed. Not only can porn not normalize abuse of victims, but it can also normalize sexual abuse in the minds of pornography consumers. Research should suggest that when somebody is consuming pornography, they're participating in what is called objectification. And when consumers develop a pattern of objectification and dehumanization, viewing others as objects to be used rather than complex beings with individual agency, it can also become easier to commit violence against them. In fact, research has shown that porn consumers are more likely to express an intent to rape, less likely to intervene during a sexual assault, more likely to victim blame survivors of sexual assault, more likely to support violence against women, more likely to forward sexts without consent, and more likely to commit actual acts of sexual violence. In fact, some evidence suggests that this desensitization towards sexual violence through the consumption of porn can then manifest in more willingness to buy sex, which increases the demand for individuals being trafficked for sex. So you can see there's a clear distinction between, geez, that was a mouthful, wow, a couple of pages there. I hope you get it all. I was reading quite quickly, but you can see, maybe listen to it again slowly, and you'll see there is clear evidence, not just from this website, but there are many others and many other experts on this website. You'll see they've got a whole bibliography, if that's the right word, credit of all these sources that they get this information from. So it's not like they're just sucking this out of their thumb, or it's just totally anecdotal. As they said earlier, it's from scientific research and personal accounts. So we can see through many experts that there's a clear link between pornography and the demand for human trafficking for sex. Okay, that brings us to point number 4. How can porn promote sexual violence? Can it promote sexual violence? That is the big question. And just by the way, very quickly, just so that you know, I think I'm politically aware enough to be able to discern whether this research in particular, Fight the New Drug, is some kind of right-wing extremist kind of website, and I don't discern that in the least. I think it's a good idea to have open discourse and to keep an open mind, and it is, just listen, take it in, think about it, and listen maybe before you speak. Keep an open mind, and maybe this is going to challenge some of your paradigm, because maybe your paradigm for all your life has been watching pornography as a teenager all the way through your adult life and thinking absolutely nothing of it, and now you might be challenged to start thinking of, say, the nitty-gritty, the practical issues. These are all practical issues that we're discussing, very little moral issues. Well, morality of course comes into it. I mean, people are sovereign, and then you kidnap them and torture them and whatever, the morality comes into that, of course, you know. But in any event, what I'm saying is this research, they're not thumb-sucking it. It's they've got links. I'll show you, like I said earlier, they've done their research from certain experts in the field that have studied this, and this is how they come up with these figures. So point number 4 is this: how can porn promote sexual violence? So I'll read from the article. As few as 1 in 3 and as many as 9 in 10 porn videos depict sexual violence or aggression. That's especially concerning, considering that research indicates that these sexually violent narratives can bleed into consumers' attitudes and behaviors. That can really make you think, right? To start, let's talk about the content of porn. Is it mainly sensual but explicit sex, or is it extreme content common? One team of researchers with the same question analyzed hundreds of the most popular porn scenes and found that 88.2% contained physical violence or aggression, while 48.7% contained verbal aggression. Another study estimated that nearly 40% of videos analyzed on Pornhub contain visible aggression or violence, while 25% contain verbal aggression. And yet another study suggested that 45.1% of Pornhub videos and 35% of videos on X videos depicted violence or aggression. And as each of these studies agreed, women were always almost the targets, So how does this normalization of sexual violence affect porn consumers? Well, according to neuroscientific studies, with repeated exposure to porn, consumers can become desensitized to some sexual content and may need to consume increasingly extreme content in order to get the same rush as before. Porn is sending the message that sexual violence is just a part of sexual pleasure. By watching scene after scene of dehumanizing or violent content, it can start to seem normal. Research also suggests that increased pornography consumption is associated with the enjoyment of degrading, uncommon or aggressive sexual behaviors. Another study indicated that teens often report trying to copy porn in their own sexual encounters, and that the pressure to imitate porn was often an aspect of unhealthy relationships. What we are saying is that porn plays a role in normalizing sexual violence, which can have devastatingly real-world consequences. Regular porn consumers might tell themselves that they aren't personally affected by porn or the toxic messages it perpetuates, but research suggests otherwise. There's no guarantee that porn won't affect a consumer's attitudes about sex in unhealthy ways. A significant portion of the porn consumed by millions of people every day reinforces the message that sexual violence is a normal part of what good sex is supposed to be, making it more challenging for many young people to prepare for healthy sexual relationships where their consent and boundaries are respected. As our society continues to reckon with rape culture and the things that perpetuate it, it's important that we start to recognize the role that porn plays in normalizing sexual violence. Wouldn't you agree with that? Wouldn't most people agree with this? I'm hard to press to find what argument you could have against this, but you're welcome to leave comments in the below. and because I'm really into free speech, freedom of thought, and open discourse without insulting, and with respect from one human being to another. And but that's a very convincing argument for me. And they go on to say, yeah, they end off with that particular point by saying no to porn and its problematic narratives help to build a healthier world. I think they've got a point over there, I must say.